Hi, welcome to the Get Strong and Healthy podcast. My name is Anna Clow. Thank you for being here. Today, we've got a guest joining us, Jillian Harbarcuk. Jillian and I met virtually through a group that we're in, and we were like, hey, we both have podcasts. Let's get on a podcast. And that's like the extent of our relationship. But
Yeah.
checking out Jillian's Instagram, I was like, this feels super aligned. I know we can have an awesome, valuable conversation for our listeners. And I think you guys are going to love what we're going to dive into today. We're talking metabolism, reverse dieting, all that kind of good stuff. So, Jillian, I'd love if you share just a little bit about yourself and then also a little bit about your story as well. I'd love to hear like how you got to where you are today in terms of business and maybe your personal journey too.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely ties in together, but thanks for having me. So, gosh, I going all the way back to like 2013. Honestly, even before that, in high school, I was always an athlete. Didn't really have weight issues, but of course, I saw my mom doing Weight Watchers and diets, so I did Weight Watchers and diets. Even at like 17, I think was the first time I did Weight Watchers. And then I got pregnant around when I was 21 and I gained 65 pounds during my pregnancy because I just was not healthy. And then I ended up with a condition where I had to be on bed rest and very sedentary. And it was humbling postpartum to have always been fit and lean and athletic and to just be in this body that I was like, I don't recognize this person. So I'm super fortunate because I feel like not a lot of people can say this, but early on in my fitness journey, aside from like the sports that I played, I went to the gym and I hired a trainer because I was like, I need to lose weight for the truly the first time ever. And I have no idea what I'm doing. And I hired such a good trainer from the start. However, I was exposed to bodybuilding in this gym, and that was really what I dove headfirst into to lose weight. I was like, perfect. This is a perfect thing to set a goal for to lose weight. The best and worst kind of pressure, really. So I lost all of the weight. I thought I felt amazing, all of these things, but realistically, I was eating 1,000 calories a day. I was in the gym 6 or 7 days a week for 2 hours at a time. I had a really toxic relationship with food and my body, and I was using macros, but I also love that I can share this too because some people say macros didn't work for me or I don't like tracking macros. I was also using macros, but eating 1,000 calories a day. So just like in the unhealthiest way. And I went to compete in a national show in Vegas and I was binge eating at that point every like third day of the week. I hated my life and myself and I felt so much pressure and I was like, wait, why am I doing this? And I just woke up one day and quit and never did it again. And that was a good 3 year journey after that of like getting my cycle back, healing my relationship with food. I did CrossFit, I did powerlifting. I was like, what does a normal person do to work out other than go to the gym 7 days a week? So I was really kind of trying to find myself and I started to coach in 2016 when I really found some balance with macros and training for myself. Naive because I still had a long way to go. However, I've been coaching since then and I know that we're super aligned in just the way that we approach like coaching and health and what we want for women in this space. And that kind of led me to today. And I just shared on my Instagram story recently that I'm definitely in the most like comfortable and confident and like balanced place in my life that I've ever been when it comes to like my body and my health. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days. Doesn't mean I'm not going through a very stressful period of life now specifically, but I know how to manage it. I'm super in tune with my body and know like when I need to adapt and pivot and cut back and ramp up. And it's just a really cool spot to be. So now I coach too, and it's just been a beautiful 10 years so far.
Wow, that's really cool to hear. I have a very similar journey. I think a lot of us, we start and we get so neurotic and so obsessive and so intense, and then we have to unlearn all those things, but then relearn how to do things in a way that's like actually healthy for us, mentally and physically. So cool.
Yeah.
So let's dive on into our topic today. We're talking metabolism and why this is really important for you to understand to, our listeners listening is when we have misconceptions about our metabolism, like for example, you think that I've had a few clients that think they only burn in a day how much they burn when they're exercising. And that can be so toxic and lead you to feeling like you can't eat anything and you have to exercise so much just in order to lose weight. And there's just this misconception around that. And then also, when we see chronic undereating, we see clients get into a spot where they're like, I look at food and I gain weight. They feel like they can't eat
Yes.
anything. And that's what happens when we really like downregulate a metabolism. So first, Jillian, I'd love if you just sort of give us an overview of like what is metabolism, and we can break it down into the different sections and what those mean for people listening.
It's so funny you mentioned like just being neurotic and like focusing on calories burned because when I went through that period after bodybuilding, I went to Orange Theory and I was like, I cannot come to these classes because I am so competitive that I was like, I will have the highest splat points, I will burn the most calories, I will do whatever it takes. And then I associated that in my head with, I was trying to like figure out this like new body and accept it and you know, get to a healthy place. And to me at that time, I went from one extreme to a different one of, going from bodybuilding and everything to now going to Orange Theory 6 days a week and thinking just burn more calories and your binges won't matter or whatever. So obviously that was an evolution. But I say all of that because I came from that place of eating 1,000 calories and I had done diets in the past, but never to that extreme of a situation. And after that, I gained, gosh, 20 to almost 30 pounds, I think, within like 5 weeks after that day I woke up and said, I'm not competing anymore. And I actually convinced myself that it wasn't body fat, that it was water weight and it was all of these other things. Like I truly believed that. Like I was totally in denial until one day I realized like I gained 20 plus pounds in just over a month. Like what was wrong? I couldn't get it off after that. I was really confused about how to approach nutrition. And then I ended up hiring a coach, which again, not a lot of people say they hired a coach this early on in their journey. So I am super grateful. It was still an evolution and it wasn't the best coach in the world, but I went through a reverse dieting. And that was my first like true exposure to this process and understanding why I went from eating 1,000 calories to gaining 25 pounds to now I can't lose a single pound. And I was just in this cycle of like most people are diet all week, YOLO on the weekends, pissed at myself on Monday. And when I understood metabolism, and this is what I share to women now, is like if you understand metabolism, you wouldn't take yourself to these extremes with dieting, and understanding metabolism and maintenance and diet periodization is really like the secret sauce to sustainability. So I always use the phrase that your metabolism is whatever you feed it. So I was feeding it 1,000 calories for so long that it was adapted to that and it had downregulated. I mentioned I didn't have a cycle. My hormones were just all over the place through that time. Of course, I had these binges, so I would gain 3 pounds. Again, convince myself it's just water weight from extra calories when I really do think I was gaining and losing so much body fat, just all of these extremes. So, anyway, going through this reverse dieting process was essentially sending these safety signals to my metabolism and giving it time to upregulate and speed back up and let my body know like it's okay for hormones to calm down, for everything to level off. And that was really the game changer for me. That was when I was like, wow, I have to introduce this to other people because women need to know about this and stop dieting the way that I did and that we all do. And we've all gone to those extremes. So, essentially getting my metabolism back up to a healthy place, well over 2,000 calories, so that I could eat food and live life and not feel like you mentioned you look at a slice of bread and gain 5 pounds. I just had no metabolic flexibility. My body was really I hate the term survival mode. I'm assuming you don't like that either, but it really was in a state of like fight or flight and just surviving. So yeah, that was kind of like my path through reverse dieting. And yeah, I know we can dive so much more into metabolism and how that works and everything too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And so with metabolism, I was just pulling up this chart of like explaining what makes up your metabolism. So I think this is a great place to kind of start, and then we
Yeah.
can get into like how, how it's adaptive and how we can adapt it. So with metabolism, basically, in other words, this is how many calories you're burning in a day. So your total daily energy expenditure. And so the first piece that makes up most of your metabolism, it's actually 70% of your metabolism, is your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. And that is basically, in other words, like everything you burn, if you were to just lay down all day, not really move, like this is what your body's burning just to keep the lights on, to keep you breathing and blinking and all your different bodily functions. And so that is, really big part of it that a lot of people don't even know. Oh my gosh, that actually makes up most of your metabolism. And that's where we can talk more about this in a little bit, but that's where we can add muscle and really see, our BMR increase. And that's really that biggest part of our metabolism. And then next piece, which is about 15% of our metabolism, is NEAT. So NEAT is your non-exercise activity. So that is anything like walking. Some people count walking as exercise, but I would say I count it in NEAT. And then
Mhm.
that's also like when you're, getting up and down to like turn off the light switch, all those different things. Twitching, that's going to be your non-exercise activity. Then you've got your thermic effect of feeding. That's going to be about 10-ish% of your metabolism, where that's all the energy that your body burns, literally just digesting food. And then lastly, we've got exercise activity. And so that's only about 5% of your metabolism. And that's where most people have their, brain blown away. They're like, what? And that just really goes to show how trying to just burn more in the gym and just like focus on calories burned is not the most effective way to try and create, a calorie deficit. We'll talk about the most, effective ways, the biggest things to focus on, but really what you need to know is use training as a way to get stronger, build muscle, get better in the gym, and really utilizing nutrition and some of these other levers to, create a deficit. But so tell us a little bit more about like, what does it mean that, our metabolism is adaptive and like, how does that work?
Yeah, so one of the things I talk about with this, breakdown of your energy expenditure specifically is, like you said, we put all our eggs in this 5% basket of our day, and I don't want to say neglecting because people are focusing on, like you said, steps with their NEAT and all of that, but really the best way to capitalize on calorie burn and improving your metabolism is lifting weights, because the more muscle you have, you're going to increase and maximize that calorie burn in the 70%. And that's what's going to allow you to burn more calories at rest. And also, I always say that I'm jumping the gun when I speak for women when I say this, but I think it's a fair assumption in that we want to look lean and fit and toned and like we work out. We don't just want to be skinny and small. Maybe you do. If that's it, cool. Probably not the podcast or the episode for you anyway, but ultimately that's our goal, right? So when I use the phrase that your metabolism is whatever you feed it, when I was feeding it 1,000 calories, eventually I was feeding it for so long, such a low calorie intake that my body essentially was like, okay, this is all the energy that I'm getting. And I always use the analogy when I explain this of like a paycheck. Let's say I was eating 2,000 calories and then I dropped to 1,000 initially. That's a huge deficit, right? So, of course, I'm going to burn calories, but eventually you got to adapt, right? Maybe you had a savings account and, you were like, okay, this paycheck being cut in half isn't so bad. But then eventually you kind of got to adapt and say, shoot, I only have 1,000 calories to live on, right? So you got to prioritize things. Like you said, you're kind of shutting lights off in the other areas. Like then that's when I lost my cycle, because your body's not prioritizing fertility, your thyroid downregulates. You'll notice digestion gets wonky, right? So your body's essentially saying, I got to keep this chick alive because I'm not getting the energy that I need to support this human and truly thrive. So it downregulates. It's not going to just continue burning calories at a fast pace because you would die, honestly, if you keep burning at that pace, right? So your body doesn't know if you are in a place of famine where you have no access to food, and that's a survival instinct that our body has, right? But it doesn't know if you are truly in a period of famine or you are just doing another fad diet, right? It doesn't know the difference. So either way, it's going to adapt to that. Now, the beautiful thing is that your metabolism cannot break, right? Which a lot of people think my metabolism's broken, it doesn't work, I'm getting older. It adapts, and our bodies are super resilient in that sense of it downregulates to keep us alive. But when we start to give it the energy it needs, it's essentially becoming more efficient and speeding back up with us, right? So you can slow your metabolism down, but you can speed it back up. And that's the really cool part, and why we talk about reverse dieting and maintenance and building muscle, because those are all things that are going to heavily contribute to being able to adapt your metabolism back in a higher place that's going to be way more efficient for fat loss and also just better for your life and eating more food. So when you see these cases of somebody saying, I'm eating more food and losing weight, there's a lot of nuance to that, but ultimately you're giving your body what it needs. And it's essentially saying, hey, thanks for this energy. I'm going to be a little bit more efficient in burning fat because it doesn't feel the need to hold on to that anymore for energy. So I love that paycheck analogy because I think people are like, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand why you're
Yeah.
essentially just spending money you don't have, right?
Yeah, and I think it can be like such a positive thing from a mental perspective when you realize that your body is literally trying its best to survive. It's not trying to fight you. It's not trying to make, weight gain super easy. It's literally adapting to like the stimulus that's being thrown at it. It's like, oh shoot, we have low energy availability. We're gonna lessen, how much you're twitching so you burn less energy, like little things like that. And so the way that you can increase your metabolism if you do think you're in a down-regulated spot is through reverse dieting. And this is, I'm sure you can relate to this, like one of our favorite things to teach clients, but it's also something that people can have a lot of resistance to as there's so much, diet culture speak. And oh my gosh, you tell the woman who's been on a diet for the last 20 years that we need to start eating more when she comes to you with the goal of fat loss. That is a hard conversation to have, but it's
Yeah.
definitely very necessary. And so with reverse dieting, it's a very calculated way that we are slowly increasing food. We might be slowly decreasing cardio. We definitely are very much focused on muscle building. And throughout this process, what reverse dieting isn't is just, eating a lot more like all at once. That's where that like rapid weight gain will probably come from, is you're just not giving your body enough time to start adapting the other way. And so with reverse dieting, I'll start with the nutrition aspect. That's something where, depending on where you're at, like let's say you're really deep in a hole where you're eating really, really low, like, when Jillian was eating 1,000 calories, that's probably somewhere where we'd bump up a little bit more than when we're,
Mhm.
let's say, like longer into a reverse diet. So, depending on where you're at, that'll tell us like how much we're going to bump you up. But we're going to bump up food, and really from there, it's all about monitoring how a client's body is responding. So that's where we utilize, our biofeedback tracking, looking at progress photos and just how you're feeling, and really just seeing like how we need to adjust your nutrition, adding in week by week, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of fat, maybe protein, depending. And that's really what we do in terms of nutrition. So if you have anything to add to that, but then also I'd love to hear like what you do in terms of the training side of things.
Yeah, for sure. So, no, that's exactly it. And I agree that it's usually a bigger bump initially. But, when we have these very hard conversations with women, I always ask them, like, where are you now? Like, you want to eat less food. You are so convinced that dieting is the answer, but you are telling me that you've slowly gained weight over these last 10, 20 years that you've been dieting and restricting calories. What's the harm at this point? Right. Like, and I think, when we talk about eating over 2,000 calories, women are, oh my God, I don't know when the last time I ate that much food is. And I'm like, you just haven't done it intentionally. And it's not a day that you would typically track it. Right. So we just don't have the awareness. But when you're binging every Friday and Saturday night, you're probably eating well over 2,000 calories. You're just not doing it intentionally and tracking and monitoring that intake and seeing how your body responds, right? And if you're intentional and strategic about it, it's going to respond favorably. You just associate more food with the way that you eat more food, right? A lot of the times, not obviously not speaking for everyone. So reverse dieting is obviously a very strategic and intentional way to add more food back in. And it might be a matter of like, we add 100 calories and we stay there for 2 or 3 weeks and give your body time to adjust. But I think the other huge component of reverse dieting is the mental side of it. A lot of times when we're going through this process of increasing calories at a slower pace, does reverse dieting need to be this slow, long, drawn out thing? Absolutely not. But if you've been dieting for 20 years and I tell you to eat 500 more calories tomorrow, one, digestively, your body's probably not ready for that, and that's not going to feel great. Will it adapt and adjust? Sure, but like, why go through that discomfort unnecessarily? Two, if you are adapted lower, you might see a little bit of fat gain if you make larger jumps. Everyone is different. But the third and biggest thing that I think a lot of people overlook is the mental side of things, because most women are so terrified to intentionally eat more because, again, we associate that with negative consequences when that isn't the case. So reverse dieting process also allows for us mentally to find a safety net and make an association with, like, hey, look, I am eating more food, I'm tracking it, I'm monitoring it, and my body is, I'm okay, right? I'm not gaining 10 pounds of fat overnight. So it's that mental component of it too that I think is such a huge part of the process, especially when it comes to like coaching. But obviously, if you're trying to execute a reverse diet yourself, it's going to be your probably your biggest crutch, or the thing that holds you back the most, because we'll see the scale go up and be like, oh, hold on, it's not working. But like you said, we have to look at all of the biofeedback. How are your clothes fitting? How are your pictures? Are you taking inches? And I know you have a lot of clients like this, but I have a client right now that started with me at 1,700 calories, is at 2,400 now. She's gained about 4 pounds, but she has never lifted this heavier intentionally in her life. No, she's not a power lifter. It's just heavy for her, right? And the other thing is, she's down over like, I think 12 inches at this point, but she's up 5 pounds. Like, that is true body recomposition. And, we talk about like newbie gains. She's very new to actually like truly lifting weights. Take advantage of that period of life. I wish I could go back and redo it and use it the right way, but she's able to gain weight at a much faster pace than somebody like me who's been lifting for 10 years, because it's a new stimulus for her. So to go back and use that stimulus with progressive overload for the first time lifting weights, I'm like, man, I could kick myself on losing that opportunity to build muscle at such a fast pace now that my body's adapted to it. But that's really what it's about, is we're adding calories in, but with pairing that with strength training, we are driving those calories straight to building muscle and doing it way more efficiently and intentionally. And that's really going to drive the most change in your physique. But also from a longevity standpoint, muscle is the greatest thing you can have when it comes to health and longevity and disease prevention and body composition. And it's your insurance. It allows you to eat more calories at rest. And I love to eat food. So I lift weights so that I can just eat more.
Yeah, we could probably do like a whole episode on the importance and the benefits of building and having more muscle in your body. It's endless.
Yeah.
More people, knew it, but a lot of people are waking up to it, which is awesome.
Yes.
But sort of another thing on the mindset side of things is it is such like a mental, mind-blowing moment when like you realize that a reverse diet is something where, all right, we still need to have intention. We still need to be disciplined. We still need to be consistent. I think a lot of the time, you know, people can start to only know that discipline and that intention when it comes to a deficit. And then outside of that, they're like, oh, I'm eating whatever I want. And, they let go of those things that they've been practicing for so long. And so that's definitely something where like that gets into the conversation of 365 lifestyle change, moderation, not this crazy, you're so restrictive and you're like all in, you're killing it, you're dieting, and then you're just not, we need to have that sort of balance and make this something sustainable. So yeah, it's definitely reverse dieting and maintaining, because really the biggest thing with reverse dieting is we do this so that we can maintain those fat loss results that we've gotten. We're adapting your metabolism up in a way that we're not like rapidly gaining back body fat. And so with that, that's going to take a high level of intention and still, bringing that just structure and discipline to your routine. And
Yeah, I
so
think
love it.
reverse dieting can be harder than dieting itself, right? Everyone diets
Literally.
all the time. We all know how to cut calories and restrict and be hungry. Reverse dieting is hard for
Yeah,
women too.
absolutely. Because you finish, you get to this like pinnacle in your mind. You're like, oh my God, I did it. And then sometimes
You want
that
to check out.
yeah, like sometimes that like dopamine high of like seeing that fat loss, that weight on the scale go down and down, it stops, and then you're like, it's kind of like the valley of despair, I feel like a lot of the times, but at the same time it can
Yeah.
be really
Like now what?
awesome. Yeah, it can all at the same time be really awesome when you see how when your body's so insulin sensitive, how when you start eating more and the muscle that you can put on, it's insane. It's super cool. And so I love that you touched a bit on like what to expect in terms of your body changing. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit more because, like you said, people get really freaked out when the scale, if and when the scale goes up. And so, yes, a lot of the time, sometimes the scale will go up a few pounds. This isn't something where you're necessarily gaining a ton of body fat, but it's something to just really have that, if you're working with a coach, which I would definitely recommend, especially when going through something like this, is trusting your coach and knowing that, we're not going to be overshooting you and really gaining all this body fat back. What you're likely gaining is, water, glycogen stored in your muscles, more muscle, tissue, and those sorts of things. And so sometimes we do see through a reverse diet, people will even lose scale weight. They'll even continue losing weight, which is really interesting. It's definitely a smaller subgroup of people. But what that tells us is most likely that their stress levels on their body were so high that it was kind of maybe creating a bit of a plateau. And what they needed was their body needed to feel more safe. And then now their body's responding and they're sometimes, continuing to lose weight, which is really cool. And then lastly, there's the people who just maintain their weight and just continue to see these body recomposition changes, the losing body fat, building muscle, which is also a really cool spot to be. So in terms of training, a lot of the time, I think for most people, training is something where we keep that consistent. There are cases, I think, where like if you're training, like you were training like 6, 7 times a week, like 2 hours in the gym, that's something where we do, ramp that down a bit, just like lowering that stress off your body. And then
Mhm.
also cardio too. That's a thing where like if a client was doing really high level of cardio a lot, in a dieting phase, that's something where we'll slowly taper that down as we go into a reverse diet as well.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I was in the gym 2 hours a day, and let's be real, like I was not intentional 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? I was absolutely exhausted from no calories. My lifts were absolute garbage, right? Like I was not training with any level of intensity at that point. I mean, it's good that I was like lifting weights and trying to maintain the muscle that I had with being so low calorie, but ultimately I saw better results and faster rate of growth and body change in a favorable way with muscle when I had more rest days. My sweet spot, like life maintenance, is truly like 3 days a week of lifting just because of my lifestyle. 4 is what really feels good to me and what I feel like drives change for me. But I live a high stress lifestyle. And in terms of, I'm sure you can relate, anyone who owns a business, like the struggle is real, right? We're just like trying to get through the day and get to the next day. So then you throw momming in the mix and household and whatever, it's a lot. So I have to be very intentional with my rest and recovery signals because when we're in the gym, we're breaking muscle down. But if you just break it down 7 days a week and you never recover, you're never giving your body a chance to build on that, right? Like we're basically cutting down the foundation every day and then wondering why our house walls aren't getting taller, right? Like of course it's not going to. You don't have any stability there. So when I started to add in rest and recovery, I think that is so underrated and so overlooked for a lot of women. We think burn more, burn more, burn more. But again, like you mentioned, we're focusing on burning calories in this little 5%, but I was neglecting everything else. And then on top of that, not having recovery, like you said, it's super high stress on the body, and that's going to help not help, it's going to harm your metabolism in terms of down regulating it and making creating a calorie deficit more difficult for fat loss, right? So there's a lot of components to consider. And it's funny, this is why I always say women struggle because we just talk about the boring stuff on Instagram and people want to shine, they want a thing that they can like hold on to and say, oh, this is the exact formula I need to follow. And it's like, no, you need to sleep, you need to manage your stress, you need to recover, you need to lift weights, you need to do it heavy, you need to go through diet phases, right? Like we say the same things over and over and over, and that's boring to people. We're looking for the shiny object and we get carried away with that. So I think I think that's the most important part, really, of all of that. And in 2021, I crashed really hard again. This was a whole new journey diving into like functional space, but I ended up getting Hashimoto's and my cortisol was tanked. And I had all of these things I had never experienced before. And that was from, I went through this bodybuilding and that was a whole nother thing. This was kind of a different area where my hormones tanked and everything went really wonky. And I was couldn't conceive even though I wanted to because I had so much stress and I was throwing training on top of that and just doing too much. And I'm always hesitant to share this story, and I'll say that in a second, but all of that stress led to another period of life where I couldn't change my body and I couldn't change and I was holding water and I was bloating all the time. But the reason I'm hesitant to share that is because I feel like people think, oh, I'm stressed, I need to stop training. And it's like, no, 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 no. Don't go there either. Don't take yourself to that extreme and say, well, she said stop training because you're stressed. There are different stressors. You just have to modify and manage correctly and control what you can control. And I'm very type A, like full send type personality. So I just got carried away in the wrong direction. But anyway, hormones tie very closely into metabolism and all of that too. So I think that's important to understand.
Absolutely. I like can't believe, I mean, I find so many women who have such a similar story to me, and that was another period of mine as well where hormones were entirely off, came off the pill, was working 3 jobs, training like a maniac. I
Yes.
was pursuing like powerlifting at this time of my life, and I was like, that was the worst idea in
Yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah.
But then this left my body like in a really, really poor space and led me to my functional, side of, learning all these different things. So super cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess question for you is like what helped you like get out of that space of being so stressed and be able to really get into, healing mode?
Yeah. So I was the girl who said I couldn't meditate, I couldn't do yoga, it was boring. I now can objectively say that if you think meditation or yoga are boring, you need it more than anybody else. Truly, if you cannot like quiet your mind and find peace and quiet in 5 minutes of your day, you are not too busy for that. And in fact, you can't be too busy for that. You have to make time for those rest, recovery, parasympathetic inputs because it's going to backfire. And I pushed through and I was like, you're tired, it was caffeine, caffeine. I need to drink more caffeine. I got put on Adderall for ADHD and I was just doing all of the wrong things. And, in hindsight, obviously I realized that I was just putting band-aids on a root problem, just like I used to do with dieting. It was just a different form of it. And that came to a head where I had gut dysbiosis and all of these problems that compounded very quickly. And it was an ugly place to be. So I had to learn a new normal and learn new skills that I had never needed to learn before up to that point. I just never, unfortunately, got to a place where I had to be that intentional about those types of inputs in my days. And I don't recommend waiting until you're at absolute burnout to start learning those things. They are very, very critical and they can honestly exponentially speed up your results in terms of your physique, but also they'll bring so much peace. Like, I don't know how many women and moms I talk to where they're like, gosh, I'm just so irritable with my spouse and my kids, and I don't know why. And I feel like I'm on overload. And, they're just burnt out and they can't figure out why. And we can't quit our jobs. We can't leave our kids on someone else's front porch, right? We have to control what we can actually control. And it's like, okay, I have to be a mom and I need to be present. So what can I do in these other areas of my life? And that's when I started to really understand my nervous system and cortisol and the things that drive positive change in those areas. And it was hard and it was uncomfortable. And I had to do very short, sweet, specific guided meditations initially because that was all I could tolerate in my brain. And it's like riding a bike. You just practice. And the more I practice, the easier it is for me to get in that state and quiet my mind. And it's really, really powerful. Honestly, I think one of the most powerful skills you can have from a personal development standpoint as a human is to be able to shift from those two states of like hustle and grind and get shit done and then be still and be quiet and honor yourself and honor your peace. And it's a really hard line to walk. And I certainly don't balance it perfectly. And I don't think anyone can. But again, it's just important to be in tune with your body and recognize like, oh, I need a little bit more of this time, this, today or this week or this month versus a little less hustle, or I'm a little bit strategic with my lifts in certain periods of my life. So anyway, it was just like anything else. You just got to like rip the band-aid off and do it. And I think it sometimes feels like it gets worse before it gets better. Usually that's how you kind of know you're doing the right thing, right? Like I was like, man, this is hard. This sucks. I just want to train. I have work to do. My to-do list is getting longer. But on the other side of it, I ended up being so much more efficient and so much more productive and so much more happy and peaceful and less irritable. I don't take Adderall. I don't take thyroid medication. I don't do any of those things anymore. I have a coffee next to me. Yes, I have caffeine. I love coffee so much, but I cut it back when I need to and I use it responsibly. I don't drink it all day, basically through a freaking IV until 4 p.m. But yeah, that was really, it was just practicing and like getting super uncomfortable to learn a new skill. And it is hard, but when I want to master something, I'm again, my type A, I'm like full send. I'm going to be the best at this thing. And now I do yoga once a week. I go to a super slow Pilates class once a week, and I really enjoy that. And scheduling that time is the best way for me to do it and be intentional about it too.
I love that so much. And I love like the direction that this conversation has gone a little bit. I want to add
Yeah.
something to this, and then maybe we can wrap it up with coming back to metabolism, fat loss,
Yeah.
type of stuff. But so you mentioned that sometimes when you're so resistant to doing the yoga, the meditation, whatever, that's when you need it the most. And I remember very vividly a day, maybe a year or two ago, where I was so like, for lack of a better word, cracked out and like just so,
Yeah.
stimulated nervous system wise. I was like, okay, I gotta get all this done. I had so much to do, and it was 6 p.m. and I had a yoga class scheduled, like a virtual one on my calendar. And every ounce of me did not want to do it and skip it. But I said, you know what? Let me just try it. And so I like got on, and it took me 15 minutes of this hour-long class to finally like be able to breathe. But I almost like got off of the class because I was so not able to like drop in and like get relaxed. But then I finally did, and I was like, wow, I guess I really did need this. And that just like reminded me the importance of, I was going through a phase of just being super stressy for no reason, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
many reasons. But yeah, like also with these stress management tools, there's something where I really recommend looking at them as preventative and not just like the last ditch effort like me where you're like
Yeah.
you're so at a negative point and then you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
need this. Like you do these regularly and it becomes like a preventative thing. But yeah, I love that. It's definitely a really important conversation to have.
Well, I'm sure you can relate, especially like as a business owner. We always have 8 million things to do every day. And when you check eight of them off, eight more pop up the next day, or probably 12 pop up the next day. But I realized that through like 2021 and 2022, probably more than anything, maybe a little bit into 2023 because I was starting that healing process, but maybe not fully there yet. I was busy and I was not productive. And I look back and I'm like, no wonder I was like stuck in these like negative feedback loops because I was busy all day. I couldn't get anything done. Like I could not focus. My mood was awful. And I just felt like I was chained to my job and my computer and my to-dos. I'm so much more productive now when I'm like intentional about like having these like slow down periods in my day. And like you said, do it proactively. Like it's going to really improve your quality of life in general. And I think it's underrated too when it comes to, I know we were kind of tying back into like metabolism and everything, but like it's going to speed up your fat loss journey if you resonate with this, that meditation is boring and I'm busy and I can't slow down and I don't have time. I know it's uncomfortable initially to like look at your schedule and be like, where on God's green earth am I going to fit this into my day? But it's going to make those periods of working and being intentional and your to-dos so much more productive that you're going I truly believe wholeheartedly that you'll feel like you got more time back, even though you're taking away a little bit more time from your day. And that's going to make the reverse diet process easier if you need that. That's going to make maintenance so much easier to establish. And removing that stress and adding these recovery inputs is also going to help with your metabolism and make fat loss so much more efficient too. But if you think chronic elevated stress can't hold you back, you can do all the right things and still feel stuck if you're in that place. And that's kind of where I was at. But to your point too, don't wait until you have to crawl out of a hole because it's a really awful place to be. Just do it now. Take my word for it. It's really not fun.
Yes. And I'm so convinced that the people who, like you said, are like kind of doing all the right things, but they're so stressed. Those are the people who they start to look at the shiny object and they think, oh, that's going to save me. That's going to do it. And it's like, A lot of the time, a huge lever is like we're talking about this stress. But a lot of the times it is your training isn't optimized and also your nutrition, but besides the point.
Right. Yeah.
So
A little bit of
coming back to, I want to like wrap this up with the coming back to reverse dieting and like the importance of it for not just maintaining results, but like let's say someone comes to us and like their goal is like, hey, I really want to lose these 20 pounds. I haven't been able to do it. And like the importance of priming for that and like how, we use reverse diet for that. So if you could expand a little bit on like, how we really, the importance of priming for a fat loss phase.
Yeah. So I think that we often think that like the body that we have in our heads, right? Like a lot of women come to me and say, it's funny, there's like two camps. I'll have a woman come to me and say, I don't care about the scale, I just want to feel better. And then we get into it. And I'm like, you totally care about the scale, which is okay. And then there's other women that are like die hard, like I felt my best at 140. And I'm like, you probably yeah, that might have been your best point, but like, what if it can be even better, right? Like, they're like, I know I won't look like I did, pre-kids, and I'm like, I look a gazillion times better than pre-baby, right? And that's the really cool part about adding muscle and training. So many women come to me and say, I have my workouts, I just need help with nutrition. 90, probably 7% of the time, you're not training in the way that you need to drive the physique change that you're looking for, and definitely not at the pace that you want it, which I think is the beautiful thing about coaching is having that objective opinion. But reverse dieting allows us to build that muscle first. It doesn't mean we're delaying fat loss. We're just going about it in a way that is different than what you imagined or what you're used to, right? So many women are like, well, when do I get to my fat loss phase? And I'm like, we're driving change now too. So with that reverse dieting piece, it's making sure that you have a healthy relationship with food before we cut calories again. Are you getting your protein in? Are you fueling your body with nutrient dense foods? Are you sedentary all day and we need to optimize that? Are you going to have a meltdown if we're in a deficit and the scale crept up 1 pound that week? If those things are not in a good place, we're not ready for a deficit, right? Like we've got some work to do. But then tying in like the stress, the hormones, all of that, you can't. I have so many women too that come to me that are like, my thyroid's off and I bloat all the time and I'm tired and I'm anxious and I'm this and I have no libido, but I want to lose 30 pounds. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. These are two very like competing and different goals and totally different paths that we need to take. So I think it's getting super clear on what you want through that reverse diet process that gives us that time to like sort through those thoughts, but then also learn the stress management tools, make sure stress, cortisol, all of those other things aren't going to hold us back so that we have like full send green light to go into a fat loss phase and that we know that our body is like, yes, we wipe the slate clean and your body's going to respond to this diet and this stimulus like it did the first time you ever dieted without all of the restriction and the chaos, and we're being intentional about it. So I think that's really the point is reverse dieting goes so much deeper than just we need to increase your calories.
Yes, exactly. It's priming your physical body, but also the mental. I love that you really dove into that because I think it's easy to overlook that side of things, but like, we do need to really look at the internal as much as we are the external. And
Yeah.
so let's kind of tie this all together and wrap up our conversation with talking about the importance of maintenance phases. Oh my goodness, if there is something so underrated, I would say it's 100% living in maintenance. I think a lot of the time people live in a deficit, right? They just kind of there's this over glorification of like we're always dieting and like yes, we can diet and there's nothing wrong with that and it's an awesome thing. However, we can't neglect these phases of reversing but also maintenance. So maintenance is what it sounds like is you are eating at maintenance, you are kind of letting your body chill out a little bit. It doesn't mean you're not making progress. You absolutely can, continue to see body recomposition, strength increases, all those sorts of things. It basically just means, though, that we're eating around that maintenance level of calories. And really, it's giving your body how much it wants, how much it's burning in a day. And it's really a phase where you get to let your body feel safe and feel like, wow, I can chill out. And then this just makes, okay, like you want to dive into a deficit after, a 3 month maintenance phase. Okay, awesome. Your body's probably going to respond really well versus,
Yeah.
oh, you went through a fat loss phase, maybe you reversed diet, maybe you didn't, but then you want to dive right back into it and, maybe that can work. It also depends on who you are and your history and all those sorts of things. But having those phases of maintenance can be so powerful. I would say, especially if you are on the leaner side. If you maybe have,
Yeah.
let's say you have like 100 pounds to lose, I wouldn't say it's as important to like spend, take all these big long breaks and spend all this time at maintenance. But especially when you do get leaner, these phases are going to be super important. So I'd love to hear, Jillian, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maintenance is like the ultimate goal, right? Like we all know how to lose weight. That's not a secret. We need to know how to lose weight and keep it off. And I think that's often the missing component in the majority of programs that exist, especially in New Year resolution timeframes, is that these programs focus on weight loss, but none of them talk about what their perspective is or what their belief is on maintaining their weight and how you keep it off and what the sustainability component looks like. And I don't want anyone to sign up for my program just to lose weight. Like, if you can't keep it off, then what's the point of signing up and paying for it and making these changes? So it's really getting you to a point of, can you maintain your weight? Can you do it without tracking? Do you recognize your hunger signals and when you're hungry and when you're full and how to honor your body? I feel like the term intuitive eating is like really overrated and sometimes misused in the social media space, but it's like your version of intuitive eating, right? Like, do you know how much protein you had without having to track every bite? Do you know what to do if you indulged on Friday night? It doesn't mean you restrict the next day. It's like, how do you honor your body in that way? And that's really the ultimate goal. And maintenance is where you should live your life and where you should spend the majority of your time. And reverse dieting is really just the gap filler from a lower metabolic adaptation to the one that we want and the one that your body thrives at, right? That's why it's your maintenance calories. It's where your body is happiest and where your systems thrive and your hormones and your metabolism and all of those like internal bodily functions. That's when they're optimized, is when you're eating at maintenance because it has enough energy to support all of that and make you feel good too. So that's really the ultimate goal. And diet phases are the key to sustainability. And we just, like you said, we just diet, and live in a calorie deficit, and we're missing the big picture. And I'm sure a lot of women can relate to like, I lost the weight, now what do I do? And unfortunately, that typically leads to I gained it all back, and that sucks. And that's not what we want, right? So maintenance is the end goal, and maintenance is the end goal forever, where we wean off the tracking and live life. But sometimes, if you do have more to lose, like you mentioned, we're going through these periods of maintenance and then we're going to go diet again. But when we dieted, we're going to get the results, we're going to keep them, we're going to go to maintenance, send some healthy, safety, love signals to our body and our metabolism, and then we're going to go back in and do it again. And we're going to keep those results and keep compounding. And it's just going to get easier and easier as you go. So, yeah, maintenance is that's where we want to be ultimately. That's the end goal.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. And I think it's just the biggest flex. Like I saw this woman online that I follow with just an incredible physique, and she posted, "Yeah, I've been at maintenance for the past 5 years." And I go, "Wow, that's really freaking cool." And like it's totally awesome and cool if you want to just keep, going through gaining phases and cutting like for, really long period of time if that's your jam. But like I think for most of us, we want to get to a physique where we feel really freaking good and we can just continually make small improvements to it, like with living in maintenance and like not, maybe having to go into these big different phases for, ever type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that so much. And that's what we want for women. And I'm like, man, if we can really like show a woman what it feels like to like thrive and feel good and have energy and have libido and live life and feel confident eating over 2,000 calories a day, like I did my job. I'm good. I can
That's the
sleep tonight,
goal. Absolutely. I love it. I love it so much. So Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If you could share with our listeners, where can they find you? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, my social media handle is Jillian R Fit on Instagram and TikTok as long as it's with us. So
Let's
that's
speak about
definitely my unfiltered space, but that's my happy place. But yeah, TikTok, Instagram, all the same handle. So I'm excited to connect with everyone.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on and hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Bye.
Bye.